So as Monica said, I started out going to school here, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I had marketing and management courses that I was taking, and I was an average student. I really wanted to build a business, and that was what I inspired to always do. And literally, as I was living on High Street, I was actually working for a real estate broker, thinking I was going to be Donald Trump. I had read his book, and I wanted to be him, but I realized I didn't have enough capital to buy all these properties, and that was going to be difficult. So I started, every night I used to see, when I was working for this real estate company on High Street, the janitorial company, the owner of the company used to come by every day and empty my trash can. I said, gosh, I can do this too. He had a brand new van. I used to talk to him all the time. So I used to talk to him. He used to teach me a little bit about the business. So I started telemarketing instead of landowners. I started telemarketing building owners and seeing if I can get my first cleaning contract. Well, lo and behold, in Westchester Plaza, right up the street here, where the courthouse is, the gentleman was willing to set up an appointment, and he was dissatisfied with his cleaning services at the time. He was using his own staff, his in-house people, and I offered him, I said, I'll do it for free. I'll just clean your building. And it was about 4 buildings in a complex. It was about 50,000 square feet. So it was really a leap of faith, but I was willing to do that, no risk. And so I started up, and a month later, he was very happy with me, and he signed me up, and it was a $50,000 a year contract that I was awarded right up here in Westchester Plaza. It was my first janitorial contract. So that's how it all started, just from scratch right there. And then I hired people from the university for $5 an hour to help me clean. I went to Kmart to buy a mop bucket and wringer, and we're cleaning a building every night. So we took that as a reference, and we went out and started pitching all these local businesses by continuing to telemarket, to direct mail campaign to all these buildings in the area. And within our first year, we actually built $1 million cleaning business of many buildings throughout the Delaware Valley that we were cleaning. We had over 100 employees. It was really a great time. This was in 1988, when there's very little competition to clean these buildings. A lot of the bigger companies were in the city. So the following year, we went to $3 million in sales, a lot more buildings throughout the Delaware Valley, a lot more labor. And what I found was managing a labor-intensive business was difficult. People wouldn't show up. We can only afford to pay them $5, $6 an hour. Cash flow was very difficult. We would pay our people every 2 weeks, and we'd wait to get paid from our customers. So as we were growing fast, our cash flow was very difficult to maintain. And our quality control was difficult too, because we had hundreds at this point of employees, and it was difficult to watch over them every night to make sure they did a good job. So to solve that problem, we developed a franchise system, which was essentially taking each building and taking the supervisor and making him a franchisee. He became an owner-operator of his own business overnight, and we would train him. We would provide his monthly accounting statement, give him equipment and supplies, and it enabled us to develop this franchise system that just in the Delaware Valley, we had several hundred franchisees in a short period of time, and it was a way for us to have somebody that had a vested interest, that cared about the cleaning they were doing because it was their own business all of a sudden, and we would pay them once a month only after we got paid by our customer, so our cash flow problem was solved overnight. It worked so well that we started offering out franchises throughout the country. We would set up an office in all the major markets throughout the country, and whether it's in Chicago and Boston or Los Angeles, and we sold 1,500 franchises over like a 5-year period throughout the country of these cleaning franchises. It was an amazing growth story, and actually my wife was very helpful. She used to travel around the country with me and set up these offices, and we used to have a staff of like 10 or 12 people that would go out, and in each region in the country we would sell the local franchise and go out and get the local buildings to clean, and we had a whole formula that we would do. Do you want to say something about that as you used to help me sell franchises? Yeah. I don't know, say whatever you think is relevant.
Well, all true. I was there from the beginning, Nancy, Dave's wife, and it was a lot of hard work, working in the end, but we literally lived out of a suitcase, and we would go to North Jersey, Chicago, Boston, and we would work 8 in the morning.
Have you putting that? Okay. Does it work as she said? Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. So anyway, we would work 8 in the morning, sometimes to midnight. And they were grueling long hours, and I was selling franchises, and people would come in, and I would do the warm-up spiel. So I would tell them all about the program and how to get started, and Dave would come in and close them. And so we had a good routine going on. But back up prior to that, before we were franchising, we were actually cleaning. So I was in a marketing job, and I left that to actually help him at nighttime clean office buildings, taking out trash. My parents couldn't believe it because I never cleaned my house. So they wanted to know how I could possibly clean with him. But then when he franchised, it was great, and it was moving at a very quick pace, and we got to see a lot of the country. We were married, and then I got pregnant with our first oldest daughter, and I continued to work, and I went into the accounting department and went on to have 2 more kids, and now I'm a chef, but had been with him through the entire process. Good. And I will put that back over to you.
That was a good, I think that gives more color to it. But so the franchise system allowed us to go to like a $30 million business in sales, and to be, in a short period of time, a national company that had 1,500 franchisees countrywide. It was just an amazing situation. But in most businesses, over a period of time, what's working today is not working necessarily tomorrow or at the same extent. So we had to figure out a way to continue to grow the company, to kind of reinvent ourselves again. And this was by 1995. Franchising became, the economy got a lot better, where in 1990 a lot of people were being laid off and apt to buy these franchises. By 1995, as the economy was really improving, it was much more difficult to sell franchises. Literally almost every overnight, we had about 10 or 12 offices. Our sales were almost cut in half on how many franchises we were selling. And those sales were very important because we had overhead in each of these offices. So what we did, because I had the national infrastructure of this service network, the idea was to go to a national account, to like a retail chain like Starbucks, Walmart, those kinds of people, and say, I have this national network of cleaning people throughout the country. I can service you all over the country, Starbucks, and do your 3,000 locations, and give you one bill, give you one point of contact, 1-800 number to call, and give you one invoice at the end of the month. And whatever you're spending, if you're spending $5 million per year to clean all your locations in North America, I'll do it for 10% less. I'll do it for $4 or $4.5 million, and streamline it into a very professional program. And it was a very attractive. There's a couple people doing it in a very antiquated way, and it was starting to get some traction. So we were able to take this single source concept and really professionalize it and go to these chains, and we were on fire. We went from 30 million to 100 million in sales from 1995 to 2003, and we were doing tens of thousands of locations throughout the country, whether it's TJ Maxx or Marshalls, whether it's all the Comp USAs in the country, all the Starbucks in the country, Walmart's, Target was our largest account, all these retailers you would know, bank chains like Bank of America. It was just an unbelievable opportunity. Because we've grown so fast, and we were about a $100 million company, I sold my company to a private equity firm in Westport, Connecticut, called Sterling Investment Partners. Private equity is a great thing. It gives an entrepreneur like me the opportunity to sell their business where you get 2 bites of the apple, meaning that I was able to sell the majority of the company and receive liquidity to, solidify my future, put the money away in a bank, and at the same time keep a material piece of the equity, the stock, that I still maintain, still run the company, have total operational control, continue to be CEO of the company, and they're basically just investors. And by virtue of doing this, I was able to tap into, they had a $500 million fund that they used to make these investments, and they're in the business of making acquisitions, and they back entrepreneurs like me to take their business to the next level. So they were like, David, you're a $100 million company. If you can take it to $200 or $300 million, we're going to all get a great return, and that's the business model that they're in. So it was a real good fit for us, for me, and there's this whole defined market out there of private equity that you guys probably know a bunch about by now, but it's essentially a private, everybody's heard of the IPO, you go public, it's an IPO. Private equity I would characterize as a private IPO. You can do it without all the regulation and all Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a regulatory body for going public. You can avoid all that and avoid a lot of cost doing it in a private forum. So it worked out great. Now, after we were sold in 2003, the company, I took the core services, which was janitorial, to national chains, and added on landscaping, snow removal, HVAC equipment, repairs and maintenance. We would just go to the same exact buyer who we would do all the Bed Bath & Beyonds around the country, for example, was a big account for us. We would go to him and say, now that we're doing all your janitorial around the country, of all your thousand stores, why don't we apply this subcontracting model and hire subcontractors to do your landscaping and your snow? And we were able to do that very successfully. And it actually it's a bigger part of our business even today. So the business grew from $100 million 3 years later to $250 million, believe it or not. And in large part because we were able to add on these additional services. Because as I mentioned before, what works today works less tomorrow. The janitorial business became a little bit mature. I ran up so fast around North America to get all these janitorial contracts from retailers, I wasn't able to grow at the same rate, so I needed another shot in the arm. Adding services to the same customer was a logical way to do that, and we were able to take our snow business and become a $60 million snow company in a couple years, 2-3 years. We became, believe it or not, the second largest snow removal company in the country. And then landscaping and all these other different services that were just maintenance services. So I don't know if I pointed out this earlier. What I initially intended to use all my 1,500 franchisees to do the work. That was the thought process. As it turned out, I had to recruit a subcontractor network, independent small cleaning businesses or landscape businesses to do the work. So I essentially became a management company. I would go to the retailer and say, we're going to go ahead and clean your locations countrywide, Mr. Starbucks, the person that would own Starbucks in Seattle, and we're going to use subcontractors all around small market USA and hire them, schedule the services, provide quality control, pay them. We'll provide all these management services so they can just have a single source provider. It was single sourcing. And if you can imagine the retailer, Starbucks had 3,000 locations. There was all these mom and pops throughout the country that were servicing their locations. And their corporation in Seattle, they didn't know whether they had insurance, whether there was no standardization. Well, the services were very different in Seattle as they were in Chicago, as they were in Hawaii. We were able to standardize everything. So every Starbucks had the same exact products used and service scope of work in every location countrywide. And if they wanted to change it, they could just call me and say, I want to change the frequency and now scrub the floors twice a month opposed to once a month. And can you add in the window cleanings and can you cut the grass a little bit more? Whatever they wanted to change, they can do it with a phone call. And the whole country had it done literally within 24 to 48 hours. So that was the value of our service. It was a single source approach. Such a no-brainer for these retailers. So 3 years later, we became a $250 million company. All these different services, really a very profitable company. And private equity, their model is to sell the business in 3 to 5 years. They have this fund, and they have investors that create this fund for them, but they have a short-term horizon. They don't want to hold on to the business for a long term. They want to get their return. So 3 years later, we went out and conducted a process to sell the business, and we sold the business to an Australian company in Sydney called Transfield Services. They were a $1.5 billion company in Sydney, in Australia, but they wanted to come to North America. Everybody wants to come to America because it's the biggest and greatest market in the world to do business. So lo and behold, I met with the CEO. We really had a terrific relationship. They didn't have any operations in North America. We were similar to their business model in Sydney, but different, and they purchased the company. Literally from the time I met the CEO, 3.5 weeks later, the deal was done. And we had a new owner to U.S. Maintenance, which is the name of the company, which was an Australian firm. And this is very different than a private equity company. They want to hold it long term. They want to change your culture to their culture. They want to, use the business model differently than as a pure private equity company would. So they set up a corporate headquarters in Philadelphia. They started buying other companies. They were also supporting me with acquisitions to build, our company, U.S. Maintenance. And I bought out my 2 competitors that I've been building relationships with for a long time, that were neck to neck with me in sales at certain points. And one was a $100 million company in the janitorial business. Another one was another $70 million company also in the janitorial business. Because I was able to have the backing of a $1.5 billion Australian firm, I was able to convince that board in Sydney, Australia, to provide the financing to buy these 2 companies. And it just so happened, you can't time your opportunities. These 2 companies, I was fostering a relationship for years. They were ready to be sold all in the same time frame. So literally within the same week, we purchased these 2 companies, which represented $170 million in sales. It made U.S. Maintenance approximately about $500 million in sales. This was by 2008, or 2007 rather. So when I sold to the Australian firm, I stayed on for 2 years as CEO again, and then I became a consultant after that for 6 months. And then I retired from from U.S. Maintenance after 20 years of a ground floor startup and building this national business. And that's when I formed a company called Longport Capital. And Longport Capital is just a place that I have a place down the shore in Longport, New Jersey. It's nothing more than that. And the purpose of Longport Capital is to make investments in other businesses to back entrepreneurs, just like me, that have smaller businesses that want to grow it to the next level, but do not have the capital nor the expertise in order to do that. And that's a very valuable thing when you're growing and you need the capital, you need the mentorship of how to grow. So that's the purpose behind Longport Capital. And then we made our very first investment, believe it or not, 3 weeks ago, and we purchased a company called Shields Business Solutions. I think somebody's here from Shields, that works in Shields. Is that the case? You're Todd's son? Oh, hello. Yeah, I knew you were going to be here. That's great that you're here. Shields Business Solutions has been around for 37 years. And it's a regional company that operates in the mid-Atlantic states of the country. And what the company does is they provide service to ATMs. We service over 1,000 banks. That, these ATMs out there where you get your money, we fix that equipment. And we also provide the cash that goes in these ATMs. We deliver that cash like twice a month to all these ATMs, and we fix them as they break down. Plus, we have our own ATM machines. We own hundreds of ATM machines in retail locations throughout the mid-Atlantic states. So as somebody goes and withdraws a couple $100, we get what they call a surcharge fee, an interchange fee as well, which is how we can make our money. So the reason why I bought this company is because it's based in about 5 or 7 states, largely, and my intention is to grow it throughout all 50 states. And the company founder has been in business for 37 years, and he's ready to retire. So it has a wonderful management team. It has 82 employees, has a fleet of 55 vehicles, and it's a market-leading company in this part of the country. So, and because it has that maintenance component to it, it really fits in my background, and I'll be able to drive it forward. So that's where I'm at today, and I think at this point, I think it's probably the right time to open up for questions and dialogue. Monica, where are you? Yeah, is that okay? Are you? Yeah, you want to tell some?
I just want to share a story or two about Dave's when he went into the snow business. Every TV in our house had the Weather Channel on it, and we had a couple winters where I think it snowed every other weekend because I know my kids were home. And all he would do was just watch the Weather Channel, and he would get out there with a ruler and measure it to see how much money he was making. So he's been entrepreneurial since the day I met him, from doing things here at Westchester to starting the company. And one little piece of advice is just never give up. Don't let people tell you can't do it, it can't be done. And I've seen David's business. It hasn't always been like this. There were tough times. You just have to stick through it and keep with it and believe in yourselves. And very proud of him. But the snow business was a fun time in our house because the kids were walking around like this, and they were excited when it snowed over an inch because Daddy was making money. So very happy.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome, dear.
Very nice. So I'd like to open it up to questions. Any types of questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Dave, I'll ask the first one. I actually asked you this before, but since Nancy just made the question, I asked it originally was, all right, so you have this big company, you're running it out of Norristown, and you get a call at some point in the morning that some snow removal team in a target in Omaha, Nebraska didn't show up. What do you do?
God.
How did you manage the logistics of that kind of a problem?
It's funny, I still get a little nervous when you even ask the question because it happens so often. We had about 500 to 600 people in Norristown in what we would describe as our headquarters, but our operations center. And we would have a dedicated account team for each customer. We had about 400 national accounts. So for Target, we had about 20-some people as a dedicated team in Norristown that would work on purely Target. And what these people would do is they would schedule the services, they would send work orders out to the subcontractors to have them signed off on by the store manager. We would follow up on the services after they were performed to make sure the manager was happy. We would pay the subcontractors after service was done, provide all types of reporting back to our customer Target, which is in Minneapolis. Now, we serviced probably about 1,000 locations which we were required to do snow removal for. And when a big storm would hit, be it a foot of snow throughout the Northeast or Midwest, we would have 1,000 stores that we have to go plow. And we'd have in advance all these subcontractors that were contracted to go out and plow. They had a very specific scope they had to do. Now, we would alert, we knew we had a whole command center. We had all this technology would tell us when the storm was coming. And we would alert these contractors saying, hey, the storm's coming in 48 hours, it's now coming in 24 hours. And we would call these people and say, you got to be at the, we're just giving you a heads up, you got to make sure that you're there, you got salt, you have your labor ready. And then after the storm, when it's actually going on, we follow up with the store manager and say, did they show up? Is everything okay? Any exceptions? And then we would open up a work order if there was an exception, if the contractor didn't show up, or they plowed part of the lot, not all the lot. So we had a database system that allowed us to follow up on every service. Every store would get a phone call the day of the storm to make sure they were satisfied with how the sidewalks were shoveled, how the lot was plowed, whether there was enough salt on the parking lot. And then if there was an exception, we would be able to print out a list of the 10 exceptions for that storm or the 50, depending on how bad of a storm it was. when it was a big storm, we would have a lot of exceptions. And we'd have some angry managers saying, my God, I can't, everything wasn't plowed right, we can't open up our store. Can you imagine if we were responsible, if there was 2 feet of snow, if our guy didn't show up, and they can't open up their store, they have loss of sales, we would be responsible for that. Not only can they fire us, we could have damages. So it was such a mission critical thing. They paid us really well for this service. And today it's still one of the leading customers for U.S. maintenance. But at the end of the day, the controls from are inside by scheduling and following up. And we had 200 field technicians around the country that worked for U.S. maintenance that were geographically based. They had a territory. So if it was in Colorado, and my field manager, during a major snowstorm, he would go visit all the lots. So not only were we scheduling, or were we alerting the contractors and following up, we would go visit the parking lots and make sure that they were doing a good job. So we had a very tight quality control program. And that was the essence of our business. If you can't execute, if you can't provide good customer service, you're not going to grow. We grew because we were delivering such a great service delivery. We were able to plow the lots, make the managers happy, generate an invoice back to them within a week of all their stores, and any exceptions that we had, we were able to close that because it's never perfect. You always have the guy that doesn't show up or he doesn't do a good job. But it's not. They would evaluate us not how many problems we have, but as a management company, how quickly we recovered, how quickly did we close out those exceptions, fix the problems, and make it right, and then we move on. So, Chris, I know it's a long-winded answer, but it's a real quality control discussion, and it is actually the essence of our business. Without the quality control component, because that's our heartbeat of U.S. maintenance, we wouldn't be able to grow to over 100,000 locations that we service and that I used to service in North America. But very good question. So keep them coming. Repeat the question. You got it. What do I look for when I'm investing in a business? Yeah, it's a very good question. Fundamentally, I didn't want to become homesick, meaning I didn't want to go back into something that was so similar because I knew it so well. Just because of that, fundamentally, you want to have a good business. And what determines a good business is that it's profitable. It's not capital intensive to grow it. It doesn't require a lot of capital to grow. It has a scale component to it. In other words, you can scale it around the country opposed to being limited where you can't really grow and it's capital intensive. You have to buy a lot of things in order to grow. So it needs to have certain financial characteristics that make it a good business because it's very easy. There's a million businesses for sale. There's a million businesses you can buy. Finding a good business is difficult. It's really hard. And good businesses are generally, why would they sell a good business? So it's hard to find, but when you find one, you know it. Making a lot of acquisitions myself, building a national business, you get to learn what's a good business. But at the end of the day, it's the financial characteristics that really drive the day. Yeah. How do you determine what the business is worth when you're trying to buy them? It's a function of earnings. There's a multiple applied. In other words, if the business is making $1 million a year in profit, the market for that kind of business is 4 to 5 times. So that's called a multiple. So it'd be worth $4 to $5 million, a sale price, to purchase a business like that. If it's making $10 million, they have what they call multiple expansion. It means the multiple goes higher. Now maybe it's 6 to 7 times multiple on a business that's making $10 million. So that $10 million business will be worth $60 to $70 million in purchase price. So it's a function of earnings, and then there's a multiple which gets bigger as the earnings get bigger. And it's a function of that math, and that's it. Yeah. Where do I find my deal flow? Are you involved in angel investing? Talk along those lines. Yeah. Angel investing is really a startup company. It's seed money. It's when somebody has a concept and they're pioneering and they want to start something up. That is not the business model of long-port capital. There's much higher risk in that type of model. There's much higher reward. If you can back somebody that's the next Google or Mark from Facebook, you can have a super high return. But it's much risky because the high percentage of those types of deals, they don't always work out. So what we look for is an established business that's been around for many years, that has an established cash flow, that's been profitable for many years, that has a customer base that they've had for many years, and that we know with pretty good certainty that when we come in there, we can predict that future cash flow, and that we know we can pay a certain amount and we can rely on that. So our long-port capital is about buying a mature, stable, making money company in that $10 to $50 million in revenue range, and then take it to the next level. Deal flow was the second part of your question. The way you get deal flow, now that I own a small private equity, boutique private equity firm, which is not really in the true sense a private equity firm because they have a fund. For me, it's my own money, so it's not really, it's an entrepreneurial private equity fund. But we reach out to accountants, lawyers, business brokers. All of them in the Delaware Valley now know long-port capital and what we're setting out to accomplish. And anytime they get one of their customers, a business broker is selling a business, whenever that they have those assignments, they come through long-port capital now, and they know that long-port capital is looking for a $10 to $50 million business in business services opposed to technology or opposed to retail. So that we have a defined criteria that all these intermediaries know, and they give us regular flow. But it's been 2.5 years of putting this word out and developing these relationships, which ultimately led to our first closing 3-4 weeks ago. So it's not an easy task. Yeah, I probably looked at in the last 2.5 years, no exaggeration. I'm exhausted by it. Probably, 5 a week, I bet you. So, I probably look at a good 3 to 5 businesses a week, believe it or not. So you get to weed through a lot of businesses to find one that fits. All the stars and moon have to align.
Did you know you had this sort of entrepreneurial mindset while at Westchester, or was it not until you got into the real world that
I knew, and I'll tell you why. In high school, I went to Great Valley High School. I was selling posters and Michael Jackson posters in the hallway, Ferrari glasses I used to buy at a flea market, polo shirts I used to buy at a flea market and resell them. I used to sell them to my teachers. I was selling stuff. I used to get in trouble selling stuff in the hallway and selling stuff to my teachers. And I had a little record store on South Street. It was actually a kiosk that we set up on the street. It failed. It did not work. But we used to go around at Westchester University. We were, we used to throw a lot of parties, and it was very profitable at the time. And then also, we used to, what did I do? We rented out Pulsations, my partner and I, Adam, which is a nightclub down the street from here years back, and we advertised this to all, and we rented it out and made a deal and advertised it to all these universities around in the area, and it was a great money-making opportunity. We were always looking. Before I started U.S. Maintenance, I had a car detailing and window cleaning business in the main line and down the shore. I had 12 employees. I did that every summer, and made a lot of money, quite honestly. Did it all throughout Westchester. I'll never forget, one of our great accounts was Texas Instruments in Westchester. We used to clean all their fleet of cars. So it was always something back in high school that I knew that I just wanted to be an entrepreneur and make all I wanted was $1 million business in revenue. But little do you know, when you get to be $1 million business, it doesn't mean you're making money. I thought I'd be a millionaire. You're not. You're just getting started.
decided to make a decision to franchise, and how did you go about learning how to do that?
Yeah. Franchising, that's a good question. Franchising is tricky. I did it out of necessity. The question was, why did you franchise? How did you learn? The reason why I franchised is because I could not control the labor. I had all these people for $5, $6 an hour cleaning these buildings. I couldn't scale the company nationally. I needed a way to decentralize the labor. By taking each building and putting an owner-operator that had a vested interest at each building, I solved the quality control problem. Each building had a person with a vested interest. Okay, that was one purpose of franchising. And also I solved the cash flow problem. I paid the franchisee once a month only after I got paid, opposed to making payroll every 2 weeks. So franchising was a growth mechanism for me and a twist to my business that solved my two fundamental problems, cash flow and quality control. That's why I did it. And then I did it locally, and it worked, and I took it nationally. But franchising is not a panacea. It's a growth mechanism that's self-funding, solve my cash flow problem, that you have somebody that has a vested interest, but it really needs to make sense for the business. You know, there's a lot of franchisors that set out to franchise, and the business model is based upon a franchise system. Your expansion and your business model should be what the underlying business is, and use franchising as a tool. It shouldn't be your strategy, franchising. It should be a tool, a growth mechanism to advance your business to the next level. People make that mistake just like they use technology as becomes their strategy, not an enabler and your tool, if that helps.
Do you think your company will ever invest in products or just strictly companies?
Will you ever invest in products versus service companies? I think what you mean. Yeah. I sell today. We're at NC. The company I just bought, Shields Business Solutions, and I'm sorry. What is your name? Willie. Willie's dad is senior VP of Shields Business Solution, and he sells for the company ATM machines. We sell these $60,000 or $30,000 ATM machines to all these banks around the Mid-Atlantic. So we're an NCR reseller. NCR is a manufacturer that makes ATMs. And we sell all these parts that come with it. So we sell products now, which is a very important division in our company, is selling products to these banks. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, I'm meeting with another company that, for the second time, trying to purchase, that sells security products to banks. Alarm systems, access control systems, vaults, safes. This is physical equipment. This is equipment that is going to be my first venture into a pure equipment-based company. They're in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. So it's the first time that I'm going down this direction, but product or service, as long as it's in that maintenance arena, is okay.
As the world gets a little bit more connected with technology, and it's a little easier to go outside of the U.S. and communicate quickly with somebody, do you see private equity, venture funding leaving the country in search of business opportunities abroad? Do you think that's going to really increase? And I don't know if you did see that happening, what kind of countries do you think have really nice infrastructure to have these deals happening?
That's a sophisticated question. I really got to think about this one, actually. Chris, you didn't warn me about this. Okay. No, but I just got to reflect on this one for a minute. But let me try to take this one at a higher level. Because you first mentioned about technology and the internet and how that's become a global, it's enabled our world to become a global economy. So technology is so critically important. And just generally speaking, just at a high level too, North America, which is a $14 trillion economy out of a $16 trillion, am I right, Chris? There's a $60 trillion worldwide marketplace out there. What I'm saying is a lot of our largest companies today are making half their sales and half their earnings overseas. So today, America is not growing like countries like India, China. That's where a lot of the growth is. So companies are forced to go overseas to continue to grow their companies. And as it turns out, half of our corporations in the S&P 500, half of their sales and earnings are overseas. And that's actually a good thing because we become a global economy, and it's what I think is helping take us out of this doldrum of our most recent recession is that low global dynamic. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Does that help answer your question? Because I think you also asked technology as well.
I'm curious about, in the U.S. we have such a structured system of being able to fund projects, and there's a formality to it. And I'm just say in China, it might be a little different, or in Korea.
Yeah.
I don't know what countries outside the U.S. have similar funding infrastructures that allow deals to happen and allow these projects to kind of proceed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all the big private equity firms that are in the U.S., for example, they're huge funds. They're making investments now in China and India because that's where the growth is. That's where you get this mediocre growth because the growth isn't happening as much in the U.S. So these large funds like Texas Pacific Group, I spoke to them last week just about a potential roll-up in this industry that I'm dealing with now. They have a $50 billion fund. They're one of the largest players out there in North America. The person I was dealing with was flying to Dubai. He makes deals out there. They're doing deals overseas because that's where you have a lot of the real big, these are underdeveloped companies that are emerging and there's real opportunity for growth. So yes, they have their sights in these other developing countries because America has become really mature, really competitive. Still the biggest marketplace in the world and a very important marketplace, but it's not where the real fast growth is coming from.
When I hear your story, I'm always struck by the fact that your initial business, the cleaning, is something that's familiar to us. Understand that the sophistication of developing the business model over time and growing the business is a really huge piece of your success.
Yeah.
How did you learn about how to develop the business model and change it appropriately?
Yeah, that's a good. How did you learn how to perfect and develop the business model over time? How did you did you know that in advance? The answer to the truth of the matter is no. You when you're a young person starting a business, you're really doing it because your inner self wants the business and you have that passion and desire to grow a business. But while you learn it in school, and it's very important to learn it from a formal standpoint by going through college, the practicality of what to do next, you really need the experience of doing it. But eventually, when we started to build we had our first building, and you get your second building, the decisions start to become obvious of what to do next. You know that, my gosh, I have 100 employees now, and me and Nancy used to run around and check every building every night to try to make sure the quality control, that the buildings were clean. Well, we couldn't sustain that process. We knew that. We couldn't go to 200 buildings from 100 buildings because we just couldn't. You'd have supervisors, but it was just, you couldn't maintain that quality control. So that led us to say, okay, how do we fix this problem? And then we developed this franchise system. So it's by running into the problem when you start to find that solution of how to refine your business model. Because what seems theoretically on paper that may or may work isn't what really you end up running into. So it's a real living organism as you go along. But that's the fun of it. That's about entrepreneurship. That's what it's all about. You start out and you kind of twist and turn and you adapt and overcome and you do what you need to do to continue moving forward. And in a business, if you don't grow, you eventually will die. So you need to continue to grow.
Would you ever consider making a company public after expanding so much?
Yeah, that's a good question. Would you ever consider going public? I considered it really long and hard. When I was about a $100 million company, I had the opportunity to do that. And we met with some investment bankers, and we sat down and we had that opportunity. The problem with going public is that from a liquidity event, going public in 2003, you weren't able to get a lot of money off the table. You can only sell a little bit of your equity. And then you had, being a public company, you had a lot more regulation and a lot more cost to meet those regulations. And selling your stock, you have to do over a long period of time. So it wasn't a fast enough exit for me of getting money off the table. And it had all this additional regulation and costs that came with it. So and that's the whole beautiful thing about private equity. It's essentially going public in a private manner. You can, if you want to sell 50% of your company, 60% of the company, you can sell whatever percent you want. And you can retain a percent, whatever percent you want. And you're not a public company. You don't have all that regulation, this whole regulatory thing called Sarbanes-Oxley, and you have to hire people to be able to comply with that. It's a very compliance-driven. So companies that go public are generally capital-intensive companies that need to continually raise capital. And public is the cheapest cost of capital, being a public company. So generally that's what you see when there's a high capital raising need on a continual basis. But it didn't make sense for us.
When you first started your cleaning business here at Westchester, how did you convince your first few clients that a college kid was the right person for the job?
How did you convince your clients that the college kid was the first? Yeah, that was a toughie. Yeah, that was hard. It was literally Westchester Plaza, and I went there, and I had a good sales pitch, and I was a genuine guy, but I was fortunate. I remember I made hundreds of calls to eventually get Westchester Plaza to say, I'll meet with you. And as it turned out, so that's persistence, right? But as it turns out, he was not happy. He had 3 or 4 or 5 people cleaning his buildings in Westchester Plaza. There was like 4 buildings. He wasn't happy. And I said, oh, I'll solve your problem. And he liked me and trusted me. And I'll clean it, and you don't have to pay anything. He couldn't refuse. Like, you're going to clean my buildings, you're not going to charge me? We'll talk about it in a month. If you're happy, we'll do a contract. And I worked really hard. I hired 3 or 4 people from the university, paid them $5 an hour, convinced my best friend to come help me. And a month later, literally, he was very happy, and he thought $50,000 was fair to pay me. That's what the market is for that size building. So it was giving it away for free and being very persistent to finally get him on the phone. And then the next building is a whole lot easier. So it's not an easy proposition, but I was able to get it done.
In that same fact, where did the capital come from to be able to offer it for free?
Yeah, it's a good question. Adam and I had a window cleaning and car detailing business every summer, and even throughout the year. We used to do it before it got really cold. So we would make money all summer, particularly down the shore. We had 12 people working for us, and I think we were billing out $50,000 for the summer. So we had some working capital, money that we had, that we were able to use to pay people to work for us before we eventually got paid. And it only lasted for a month. I knew I couldn't last longer than that. So I had some money, because every summer we would clean up for window cleaning and car cleaning down the Jersey Shore.
What were some of the other challenges you had starting the business while you were still in college?
Right, what were the challenges while starting the business while still in college? Let me think, did I start it when I was still in college? We had a business all throughout window cleaning and car detailing, so that's easy. That was summers and when we had time. But the cleaning business, that Westchester Plaza, came right after college. And that's when it became a full-time venture, hands on deck, 70 hours a week, really tough go. But I didn't have any children. It was all fun. We stayed out to 12 o'clock, clean buildings. We go to have a restaurant that was open just to relax, at midnight. But it was, this was a way of life. This was what we wanted to do. It was all about building a business. And first year, we had $1 million business. We weren't making money. Well, we were, but it wasn't in the bank, because as you're growing fast, you're reinvesting into the new contract, and the money, even though you're making money on paper, there's no cash flow because you're growing so fast. So that became a problem, which we could not detect until down the road, what cash flow really means.
acquire a good company for a bargain price now at its current state?
You know, we just talked about this, didn't we? It's very difficult to buy a business in general, particularly in light of private equity. Private equity has become this machine of funds that are just, they need to find companies. And if there's a good-looking company, they're going to get eaten up by private equity. That being said, multiples have come down. Multiples are a function of debt. Today, banks they're not lending as much, so therefore private equities companies are paying where maybe they used to pay 7 or 8 times for a business, now they're paying 5 or 6 times. So prices have come down, but believe it or not, when the economy went really bad in 2008 and part of 2009, companies did not want to sell. Even good companies, because good companies did not look good anymore. Their earnings were down. That's not the time to sell. So everybody held the line, and unless they were truly distressed, they were not selling good companies, because the earnings went bad. Now that times are better, the economy is coming back up, the earnings are coming back up, there's this pent-up demand, and companies are back out there looking to sell. However, valuations are down, because valuations at the end of the day are a function of debt. Banks are not lending as much, so valuations for businesses are down. Does that help you? Okay.
Dave, 20 years ago, you were one of these people sitting here. We have a lot of people who have an entrepreneurial bent. What advice would you throw out to them if they're sitting here pitching to be entrepreneurs?
Definitely do it. I mean, as hard as it may be, and I mentioned that a couple of times, and you have to raise money from friends and family, and you have to scrape some money up. If you're meant to be an entrepreneur, you'll know it. You have this burning desire, and whether it's an entrepreneur or you want to be something else, you have to do what you love. If you do what you love, you'll excel at it. I've always wanted to be this big businessman and have $1 million business. I knew that early on, so it wasn't work for me. It was fun, staying out late and working and billing the customer and getting the next building. So if you really have that burning desire, you just jump in and you go for it. And you can't plan too much, and you can't try to figure everything out in advance on paper. You really need to just follow your heart and jump into it, and you'll solve a lot of these problems. You'll solve as you go along. Because if you plan too much and you look at it too much, you'll talk yourself out of it. Because, you'll start looking at statistics and, my God, this percentage of new businesses fail, and you just got to do it and jump in and solve your problems as you go along, and that's what makes it interesting. You'll morph into this whole thing. So,
when you said you made hundreds of phone calls before you actually got a meeting, how did you present yourself with those phone calls? Did you present yourself as a startup business or as a college student?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would have friends of mine that would serve as references, that can give me good references to vouch for the integrity of me. And so I was able to put together a list of that. And I would just be brutally honest and say that I started this business, and we're a cleaning company, and we had this window cleaning and detail business, detail cleaning business, and we are now morphing into a janitorial company cleaning buildings, and we want to get started in Westchester, and we are ready to go. And we'd like to meet with you to clean your building. If you're dissatisfied, would you give us an opportunity to meet with you? So just a pure and simple, keep it really simple and really brutally honest and transparent. And then it becomes a numbers game. If you call 100 people, you're bound to find somebody that's either not happy, they think they're paying too much. So the telemarketing function was critical. I learned how to telemarket. I used to work for a telemarketing selling USA newspapers, USA Today. So it was just a numbers game, making appointments with somebody that was willing to listen. And eventually I got appointments, and I was able to convert a certain amount of my people into an actual contract, Westchester Plaza being the first. So telemarketing is vital.
How did you
I didn't really know at the beginning. I used to talk to the janitorial guy that taught me the business a little bit, and he used to show me a little bit. But truth be told, I didn't really know. So at Westchester Plaza, after a month free, he'll tell me what you think is fair. And he knew the market better than I did. He thought 50,000 a year was fair. It was a lot. It was a 50,000 square feet building. It was 4 buildings in one. So I learned it as I learned that, gosh, it takes me 4 or 5 people a night to clean this building for 4 hours a night. So I got to pay $5 an hour. I have to pay payroll taxes. I have to buy a certain amount of equipment and supplies. Okay, so I add all this up in a pot. I said, this is my cost per month. And what do I think is a fair profit? All right, let me make 30% on top of that. So I take 30%, put it on top, and that becomes my price. So eventually I perfected a formula on pricing, that we know how to do it. And it's a bottom-up approach with labor, supplies, and equipment, and putting on a profit margin. And then your competition will determine how much profit you can charge, depending on what the competitors are charging.
Talk about taking a risk going for it. How do you balance being aggressive and still trying to plan things out so you don't kind of overshoot?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question because you don't want to gunsling it. You don't want to be just, too seat of the pants. You do need to, the more you plan, the better. The more you document, the more you think about it, the more you vet it with people. All that is good, and it's really important, actually. So I'm glad you brought it up. But you don't want to do it to a fault where you're doing it to a point where you can talk you out of actually moving forward. And what in theory, on paper, looks, right and it's going to work, it's never, what actuality is usually very different, which is fine, but at least you had a plan. You had a basis to go forward. So you should be very detailed, very plan-oriented, and document and just really do that, but don't do it to where it stops you. And realize it's going to change, and that's good.
Dave, let me add a comment, because I remember when Adam was here with you, we were talking about that issue, and Adam is his partner, and they were talking about some of the negotiations they had, and someone would ask if they could do something, and Dave would say, we can do that, and they would walk out, and Adam would say, how on earth are we going to do that? So
It's
there's a big element of
It's a good story.
taking chances, but then there was the conscience in the background trying to say, let's not get too crazy here. But it seems to me that the focus was, let's commit to this, and then we'll figure out later how we're going to get it done.
I can tell you a story about that. I mean, you're 100% right. I'm glad you remember that. One of my first major accounts was Core States Bank. It was 400 banks in this area. And they went out for bids. We were part of the bids. We had franchisees all around. And we ended up getting the award. But for the contract, it was like a $2 million contract. I think it was our biggest contract at the time. And, these locations were all throughout Pennsylvania, Jersey, and small market USA, 400 branches. They wanted us to start to get the award. They said you need to get going in like 3 weeks because our people are leaving. Our current providers found out we're going out for bids, and they're starting to leave, so we're running into a problem. Can you start in 3 weeks? Where normally I would think I would have 60 days, 90 days, 120. If you want the deal, I said, no problem, we'll take care of it. We will get it done. Because I didn't want to lose the deal, and we would do what we have to do to try to get ready. The first night at the job, I think we cleaned half the branches, 200 of the 400 branches. They were not happy. But each day we got more branches covered and cleaned, and by a week or two, we got it all covered. And we smoothed it over, and they were happy, and we've had the account for years to come. So you have to take risk. Sometimes you got to put yourself out there a little bit. You don't ever want to misrepresent. You want to go into it, but you're going to have to try to, sometimes you got to put yourself out there a little bit in business, as long as it's reasonable. And we did that a lot. We would take on a contract that was a push. I never forget Dollar General. They wanted us to do 6,000 stores and to strip and refinish them before the holiday season. They wanted to get it done in, I think, 60 days. And that was a push. And they're like, you got to do this. And we try to get more time. But at the end of the day, we agreed to do it, and we got it done. So this is a common thing. Customers try to push you beyond the limit, your limitations, and as long as you're honest about it, but sometimes you have to, take on a challenge that you don't realize you can do until you actually do it.
You said you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur since high school, so my question for you is, do you think your college degree had anything to do with your success? Do you think you could be here now if you didn't go to college?
Yeah, very important. And I'm not just saying that. College is my dad was, got to go to college, got to go to college. I wanted a business. I wanted to kind of push college aside, go take what I already had going with a window cleaning and detailing business. I didn't think college was important. I'm so glad I did. I met my partner, Adam. I formally got trained in marketing and management. I've socialized my skills in talking to people in social situations. I've met a lot of outstanding professors that taught me, went through case studies, all different businesses. I've learned so much in that 4-year period. I'm not just saying that. It matured me as a person, socially, emotionally, theoretically, just across the board. So that is such a critical thing to go to college, any college, to get that formal training and that opportunity. That's a huge opportunity to go to college, huge. You've got to do it.
Okay, the one last question? Okay, let's give David a big round. Well, I want to thank you, and actually, this is an incredible story, and I've heard it several times now. Every time I hear it, I learn new aspects of it. But I think my favorite part of this story.